And so when we think about somatic coaching, what we're doing is we're presencing whatever is happening. So let's say somebody comes in and they're complaining of like headache and neck pain and shoulder pain. I know from the amount of work that I've done that when somebody comes in with that particular combination, they're carrying things that aren't theirs. They're like burdened. And so we'll work to release the burdens. I know if somebody comes in with hip pain, that there's a fear of moving forward.
If you would like to support the efforts and research we are doing here on this podcast, make a donation using the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes or go to buymeacoffee.com/Shane's Brain. Thank you. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain, and today we're talking with the one and only Brenda Winkle.
Oh, thanks for having me, Shane. I'm really excited to be here.
I am too. I'm excited about this one. I think it's going to be really interesting. So welcome. Why don't we just start out with you telling us a little bit about what you do for a living?
Well, I'm a somatic coach, a trauma-informed breathwork facilitator, a Reiki master, a psychic medium, and I support people to live with more ease, more joy, so that they can do the things they really want.
Awesome. Love it. Okay, and we're going to talk a lot about those things in a bit. Why don't you now just tell us about other things you like to do, your hobbies and interests?
Well, one of my hobbies and interests was also my profession for 26 years, and that is vocal music. So I love to sing. I love to direct choirs. I love to do lots of different things musically. I'm a big fan of dogs. I've always had dogs and am passionate about dogs and animal rescue. And I love being outdoors. I don't love to camp though, but you can find me hiking and paddleboarding and that kind of thing. And I live in the Pacific Northwest. And so we've got lots of outdoors of kind of things that I can spend my time doing.
All right. Very cool. All right. I want to start out with just kind of getting to understand how your mind works a little bit. So I have a few things I want to ask you and we'll go through and start there. In this episode, we will be referring to what we call the Apple Graph. If you would like to view the Apple Graph to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it on shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia and Beyond section. If you are unable to view the Apple Graph for whatever reason, it is a graph divided into 6 sections. In the number 6 section, there is a very detailed image of a red apple. In the number 5 section, it is the same image, but with less detail. Number 4 is still in color, but has less detail and more basic shapes instead of detailed hues and gradients. Number 3 is the less detailed apple, but in gray tones without the color. Number 2 is a simple outline of the apple. And number 1 is blank, indicating no visualization whatsoever. This is called aphantasia. So the first thing I'd like you to do is visualize a red apple in your mind.
Okay.
Now go ahead and take a look at this chart here and let me know which one of those best represents what you saw in your mind's eye.
I would say probably number 6, although the apple that I pictured in my mind's eye did not have a leaf.
Okay. Now that's just a very brief starting place. A lot of times people will say a 6, but really it goes beyond that. So for you, I mean, if the scale could go farther up into maybe 10 or 12, would you get up in there, or do you think you're pretty close to around a 6?
Well, this is interesting because we're talking about how my brain works, but I'm a psychic medium, and one of my gifts is clairvoyance. And so I am able to see things really clearly in my mind's eye. So I would say probably an 11 or 12, I can really visualize things, but that's not my only spiritual gift, which is actually what made me feel like, oh, I want to have this conversation with you, Shane, because I teach people how to dig into their own spiritual gifts. And many of those have nothing to do with sight.
Right. Okay. Very cool. One other little experiment here before we move on. I'd like you to think about a chicken in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe to me what's happening in your mind when you do that?
Well, the first thing is I get a picture of a chicken. And the second thing is I associate that image with a lived memory so that I can now go to a place where I have seen a chicken before.
You said it's a picture first, then it's a memory.
Mm-hmm.
So is the memory more like watching a movie? Does the memory have movement and color and all of that?
Oh, this is interesting because I can compartmentalize it into either an image or a movie, depending on what memory I tap into. How involved was I in the memory? Was I just looking? Then it might be more like a picture. Was I interacting? Then it might be more like a movie.
Okay. Very cool. I'm assuming it was in color.
Yes, it was in color.
Would you say the colors are vibrant or muted or something else?
Fairly vibrant.
Okay. Were the images in 2D or 3D?
The initial picture was 2D, and then the memories were more 3D and tactile. Okay. So I can remember a felt sense.
Okay. Can you take the image or the video or whatever it is and kind of rotate it around and see it from different angles?
Yes, but it requires me to do that in my imagination, not necessarily within the memory.
Okay. Can you manipulate the image? So can you visualize a chicken or imagine a chicken and make it fly or put a vest and a tie on it or, mess with it in your imagination in those ways?
Yeah, I think I can do that fairly easily.
Okay. Are the images more clear with your eyes closed or your eyes open? Or is there a difference at all there?
I think before I started to work on my spiritual gifts, I would have said my eyes needed to be closed in order to make that happen. And I think that sometimes it's easier for me to shut down the visual field, and it's just less work on my brain. I feel less fatigued after if I close down the visual field by closing my eyes. But I have the ability to keep my eyes open and also see it.
So in either case, do you feel like the image is in your mind somewhere or is it projected out in front of you?
For me, it's in my mind.
Are the images solid or transparent?
They are solid.
Okay. So let's talk about the words a little bit. You made a distinction between imagination and just a regular visualization experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the things that really intrigues me. And I feel like a lot of times it's kind of an obstacle that we have to overcome because these words all mean something different to us because of our internal experiences are all so different. I asked you to visualize an apple. I used the word visualize there. With a chicken, though, I just said think about it. And then we've also talked about picture it and imagine it. So those 4 different things, think about it, visualize it, picture it, imagine it. How do those differ for you? Do they all mean the same thing, basically? Or are they different things? And if they are different things, how are they different things, if you can describe it?
So I think for me, the one that is the most differentiated is imagine it. So if I'm imagining it, I'm giving something life of its own. I'm going beyond what I have seen or experienced. And now I'm into a creation of some type of an image, a movie, a picture. So I think that's the one that's most differentiated, where I feel like there's a creator type of energy present. Picture makes me feel like there's less action involved. I'm just like recalling something. Visualize feels active to me. It feels like I am visualizing. It feels like a verb, where it's interesting for me to hear about picture it. I don't think of that as an action. It's just like something I hold in my mind. But visualize it, I'm more involved tactily. I'm allowing myself to feel what I might have felt in my hands, or to listen to sounds, or to recall fragrances. And so for me, that one is more sensory. I can pull in my other senses with the word visualize. And think of it is, again, it feels very much like just recall, like remember this. I'm not taking any initiative in creating an image that would be pleasant. I'm just like recalling.
Okay. And you also mentioned compartmentalizing it. So when you're moving into this area of imagination that feels much more involved, does that feel like a separate place you're going? Is there different areas in your mind that you're moving around to?
Yeah, I feel like it's more forward in the front part of my mind. When I'm channeling or I'm in my mediumship and I'm picturing or visualizing things in that, there's more body involvement. So
Okay.
I feel things more deeply. And when I'm imagining, it feels like it's just mental.
Okay. Again, the words are interesting and it'll probably keep replaying itself. And just so you know where I'm coming from, I have aphantasia. And when I first started doing these interviews and trying to ask people these things, and I didn't understand that dynamic of these words meaning all these different things to all these different people.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, everybody gives me a different answer, right? And so I kind of had to learn that through trial and error, because to me, all the words mean the same thing, which is nothing, right? Like I always struggled even being able to understand what people were talking about before I realized that I was different in that way.
So when you think of an apple, Shane, what do you think of? Do you think of the flavor or the texture?
It's a very distant and vague thought of an apple.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for me to explain what a thought is to me because there's no senses involved. It's just an abstract source of information, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can think about what an apple looks like, but it's just a thought. There's no visual.
Mm.
And same with all the other senses. Like it's mainly just words. It's closer to nothing than it is to something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And because of my knowledge, a thought also contains knowledge. So I know certain things about apples or chickens or whatever. So I can list you facts that I know, but it's all in kind of a distant, vague thought form.
Mm-hmm.
None of my thoughts feel very close to me. They feel like they're in the next room.
Mm.
They don't ever feel like they're front and center to me. All right. So let's talk about the other senses real quick. Go back to the chicken. Okay. If you imagine a chicken and it made a sound, can you hear that in your mind?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How would you rate it on a scale from 1 to 10?
I would say probably an 8 or a 9 out of 10.
Okay. What about the other senses of smell, taste, and touch? Do you feel like you have those as well?
Mm-hmm.
And could you rate them again on that scale of 1 to 10?
I do have a very active sense of recall for flavors, like chocolate chip cookie or a potato chip. It's a very active. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, probably a 7. My sense of smell is much stronger, as is my sense of felt, like the felt memory of tactile sensations. And I would say the tactile is probably a 10 out of 10 and the smell is a 9 out of 10.
Okay, very good. All right, so we have kind of a snapshot a little bit about how your mind works a little bit and some of those senses and how strong they are. So now let's talk a little bit about aphantasia real quick. You said that you are familiar with it. Can you tell me a little bit about when you discovered that it was a thing and kind of what you know about it?
Well, I was a music educator for 26 years. And one of the things about music educators that most people don't know is we serve the entire population of a building, which means that we have every student in the building, regardless of their educational needs, regardless of their abilities. And it afforded me the opportunity to sit in on a lot of IEP meetings, individual education plan meetings for students. And so it was somewhere in my teaching journey that I learned about aphantasia. And it is really important for teachers to realize that this is a thing, because it impacts the way in which you share information and the way in which you share knowledge. Because if someone has a difficult time imagining something, then we have to figure out a different way for them to experience.
Amen. I agree. What does it mean to be a psychic medium? Can you explain that to me?
Sure. So if you are psychic, it means you're reading the energetic field. You're reading people's energy. You are tapping into the information that people have around them. Some people will specialize in the past. Some people will specialize in the future. Some people specialize in the present, or specific things within those things. Maybe it's love, or maybe it's career, or maybe it's purpose, or maybe it's health. And then to be a medium is where we're actually having conversations with spirits on the other side, whether that's spirit guides or departed loved ones or angels. And so not all psychics are mediums, but all mediums are psychic.
Okay. How did this happen? In your case, how did you discover it, get into it, and evolve it? And just want to hear your story a little bit.
Well, it was decades before I understood what it was. I thought I had a really vivid imagination. I could people watch, and it used to be sort of like a parlor trick where people would say, okay, tell me the story of all the people. And people would walk by and I would say where they had grown up, where they were currently living, what their family was like, what they did for work. And it was just a game. And I thought, oh, this is a really fun way for me to spend time. And then I can't even remember exactly what happened, but something happened that made me realize, oh, I'm actually right. Like, I'm not making this up. I am right. And it was really jarring for me. And I sort of thought, oh, maybe I need to be a little bit more careful with this. Around that same time, I remember going to my first grade teacher and saying to her, it's going to be okay. I know you and your husband fought last night, but it's going to be okay. And her eyes got really big and she was afraid. And I was about 7, maybe 8. And I felt, oh, I did something wrong. I must have done something bad. And I got scared because she was scared. And so I took everything way, way underground, became a world-class people pleaser because I could see things and hear things and feel things and sense things that other people couldn't. I could anticipate somebody's needs before they even knew they had them. And so it really worked to be a world-class people pleaser right up until the time that I burned out on people pleasing. And then in like 2007, I went through a really difficult divorce, went on a healing journey, and through that process discovered Reiki. And Reiki is a Japanese form of energy healing that promotes the body's natural relaxation. It was like my gateway drug into everything that I do now. And in that process, I learned language around what I do. I learned language around what my gifts are. And I also met people who shared my gifts. And so that was kind of the beginning of my development into what I do now. And it started in childhood. I don't remember not having these gifts. I just had no idea they were gifts until about 2012 or something like that.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the visualization and some of the other senses and how they interplay with that. Recently, I interviewed on my Outside the Norm episode a lady named Lindsay, and she has aphantasia, and she described a vision she had, a beautiful vision where she learned all of these beautiful things. And one of the things she said that I thought was interesting is she said that I'm glad I have aphantasia because I know that was a vision and that it wasn't just something I was making up in my brain or whatever. Right. So I just want to talk to you about that. Like, since you're what I would say closer on the end of like hyperphantasia, you have these very strong inner senses. How do you tell the difference between a spiritual experience and just visualizing something?
Well, that is the question that people who have these kind of gifts are always asking themselves, whether it's intuitives or empaths, because it can be very difficult to discern what's yours and what's not. And so one of the things that I teach people is how to create a sense of energetic sovereignty so that you know when you're experiencing something that is yours and when you're experiencing something that belongs to somebody else. And so there's a little bit of skill and training involved. Otherwise, it can be just this big soup of information. And it can be really difficult to understand, okay, am I making this up? Does this belong to you? Does it belong to me? And is it just fantasy? And so one of the myths about clairvoyance in particular, which is the gift of seeing, is that the only way it counts is if you see it in your physical eyeball, like standing in front of you.
Okay.
And for some people, that is exactly how it comes through. But for many people, it is in their imagination or their mind's eye. It's something that they see inside their mind, but it's not with their eyeballs. And so learning to trust this is totally different than anything I've experienced in my own life, so it's probably not mine, is a process.
Okay. So do you feel like someone with aphantasia could have these psychic abilities?
I do.
If so, how would that work for them? Are they tapping into other senses?
Well, so there are at least 18 intuitive tracks that we know of. And there's probably more. So there's the 6 clairs, which are your 5 senses plus knowing. Then we have a variety of empath tracks like animal communicator, medical intuitive, physical empath, meaning you feel the physical sensations, emotional empath, you feel the emotions, land empaths where they can read the land and understand what has happened with the land, plant empaths. Then we have telepathy and we have a whole host of other things. So is it possible for somebody for aphantasia or within aphantasia to be gifted spiritually? Absolutely. In fact, I think it is probably likely that there is some gift within the aphantasia where it's separating out some of the senses to allow you to tap into others.
Yeah. And I've talked to people with aphantasia where I really feel that, where they're describing a very different experience than mine, where I said, it's kind of closer to nothing than it is to something. And they're on the opposite end where, like, I know everything about it except for seeing it. I can sense it spatially. I know the shape of it. I can almost see it. Like it's there. And a lot of times they can touch it. They can, it's just the visual part of it's gone. So that's really what I love about this is how different everybody is. And I just never tire of hearing the different experiences. So in your case, we've talked about, the 5 senses, and then you've just mentioned, there's like 18 of them. Mm-hmm. In your case, which ones are the most prominent and how does it work best for you? I guess what I'm asking is most of your experiences visual or tactile? Which one is the strongest for you? And which of those other areas that you mentioned can you kind of delve into?
Well, I think this was the really confusing part of understanding my gifts is that I thought there would be one really standout strongest. The confusing part is I have all 6 of the clairs and I have all of the empath tracks and I have some of the other niche tracks as well. So I rely on all of it coming together. So I'm tracking information in my body. I'm looking for sensations or feelings in my body. I'm looking for emotional changes. I can see things, feel things, hear things, sense things, smell things. I don't taste as often as I use the other senses. They call it clairgustance, where it's the psychic taste. I can access that, but it's not very common. So I would say the things that I rely most on are probably the empath tracks, especially the body-based empath tracks, emotional, physical. And then for me, clairsentience, that's the feeling, and claircognizance, just the knowing, are the things that come without me even trying. And then the other ones also appear depending on who I'm working with. And one of my gifts is to be able to share information in a way that people can understand it. And so my unique system meaning my body and the way that I operate in the world, is reading other people's systems so that I can communicate in a way they can receive. And so depending on who I'm sitting across from, my gifts will come in differently.
Oh, very cool. So what are the 6 clairs?
Your 5 senses plus knowing. So clairvoyant is seeing, clairaudient is hearing, clairsentient is feeling, claircognizant is knowing, clairgustance is the tasting, and clairolfactance is smelling.
All right, let's move into breath work. What is breath work?
Breath work is taking conscious control over the breath, which is normally an autonomic nervous system response. So most typically, you don't have to think about breathing. Your body just does it on its own. So when you take conscious control over the breath, you're communicating to the body and the nervous system that you're safe. So your nervous system says, oh, hey, they're controlling the breath. I must be safe enough to switch into the rest, digest, and repair. And then you can start to release tension, stress, anxiety. And we even notice that people are able to release emotions and even stuck sensations of trauma in the body because they're lowering those stress responses in the body.
Okay. Breath work to me sounds like something that would work well for someone with aphantasia because there's not necessarily visualization needed, right?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay.
Now, some people do experience visualizations, especially when you're doing any kind of super psychedelic breathwork experience where you're breathing with a pattern for over 8 minutes. Some people experience, they'll see colors or sensations, but I think there's other benefits. So many people experience a sense of clarity, or emotional or mental clarity, a reduction of anxiety. I think there's some other benefits that are really profound that allow for that spiritual clarity, regardless of whether or not you visualize. Because whether you have aphantasia or you don't have aphantasia, not everyone visualizes the same thing anyway. And so one of the things that's really important in any spiritual experience, whether it's Reiki or breathwork or theta healing or somatics or anything else, is to not try to compare your experience to someone else's. Because sometimes I will see different things in a breathwork experience and sometimes I won't. But that doesn't mean that there's not transformation happening.
Right. And I love that because that's my mantra. Everyone is beautifully unique. And so in my case, I've never experienced the visual thing, but the breath work that I've done has been impactful for me in my way. And it doesn't need to be your experience or my sister's experience. All it has to be is my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's helpful, then it's helpful. In most ways, I'm very content with who I am and where I'm at. I was raised in a very strict Mormon household. Mm-hmm. It was kind of like a prison to me because I was never allowed to be authentic and be who I really am. I was just, this is absolute truth. You have to do it. And I didn't know how to not do it. So I did it for 47 years. When I left about a little over 3 years ago, I literally went from misery to joy in just being able to be me.
I love this. I think that your story is inspiring. And there are so many people who are living in different types of prisons of this is the only way to be. The way that you have found yourself is really inspiring. And I'm sure it's felt very healing to know that you're not the only one that has these types of sensations and experiences.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So let's move into somatic coaching. What is that exactly?
Well, breathwork is part of somatic coaching. So somatic is based on the root word soma, which is the Greek word for body. So when we talk about somatic coaching, it's a body-based healing modality, comparing it to therapy, which is what we call a top-up modality, which, by the way, is not a bad thing. Therapy is really important, but therapy is mental. It's in the mind. Somatics are in the body. So we're doing a very similar type of process. Our goal is very much the same, but we're using sensations in the body, speaking the language of the body to get out of our own way, to stop patterns that are no longer serving us, to release stuck emotions, and most importantly, to heal the parts of ourselves, child parts and protector parts, that got frozen in time without enough resources or support. And so we just kind of get stuck there, like as our 7-year-old selves or our 15-year-old selves. And so somatics speak the language of the body, meaning we're going to feel for sensations or different muscle feelings in the body. Maybe it will feel or sound like something. People will hear different sounds. People will hear words or songs. And a lot of people will also experience visual sensations where they could see a texture, a shape, a color, or an image. But somatics are basically speaking that language of the body. So in your case, Shane, my guess would be that there would be a lot of felt sensations within the body, and there might be some sounds that you would hear, and there may be other ways that your body would communicate. And so when we think about somatic coaching, what we're doing is we're presencing whatever is happening. So let's say somebody comes in and they're complaining of like headache and neck pain and shoulder pain. I know from the amount of work that I've done that when somebody comes in with that particular combination, they're carrying things that aren't theirs. They're like burdened. And so we'll work to release the burdens. I know if somebody comes in with hip pain, that there's a fear of moving forward. And so we'll just work on whatever things feel present at the time. And it's amazing the results that can happen, both in terms of behaviorally, where we are able to get unstuck in ways that maybe we couldn't have done with therapy. And we can also heal the body. And I want to say, I'm not a medical professional. I don't pretend to be. I don't officially diagnose or offer any professional medical advice. And also, I work with a lot of people with complex medical symptoms to ease their symptoms.
A dork parade, a dork parade. The people point and gawk. It's not a dork parade, you guys. It's just our family walk. The sun is on fire. A ragtag mob of hilarious poems is available on shanesbraindomain.com and Amazon.
Okay. So in my case, I'm what they call a global aphant, meaning I don't have any of the senses at all. I don't hear, I don't smell, I don't taste, touch. There's nothing. Mm-hmm. So, like I said, I've kind of delved into this world a little bit. Mm-hmm. And there are certain things, whether it's hypnosis or, Reiki or breath work, where just personally, I feel like there's a little bit of a wall there where I can't quite get to where other people are getting. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if that's fine or if there's a way that I can maybe do it differently or kind of break through that wall a little bit. I do sometimes get frustrated with some of those exercises. Have you ever coached someone like me where there does seem to be kind of a wall there and they are not getting the results that they're hoping to get?
Well, I think that culturally, and especially if we have strong religious backgrounds, culturally, we are taught to ignore a lot of sensations in the body. We're literally discouraged from engaging in any body-based activity because it's quote unquote sinful in a lot of religious traditions. So a lot of the people that I work with come in and they don't have any sensation below the neck. If I ask them to feel into their hips, they're almost afraid to do it. And so I think that it's very common in our current culture for people to be completely divorced from any body sensation because they're worried it's bad or sinful. And so, yes, I've worked with people who have completely not been able to access any body sensations. And then we've gotten them to be able to slowly, it's a process, slowly feel sensations. So Shane, when you say you don't have any sense of feeling, can you feel like the texture of your clothing on your skin or no?
No.
Okay.
Not unless I touch it.
Okay. So if you touch it, what happens?
Well, I can feel it in my fingertips.
Okay. That's a great start. What happens if you bring your fingertips together and you rub them together?
I Well, I can feel that. I mean, I'm alive. I can feel real feelings. But if somebody tells me, if I'm just sitting still and they say, feel the weight of the clothing on your back, or feel the weight of the hat on your head, or feel the sensation within your gut or whatever, that's where I struggle. Like, I can't feel those things.
Okay. Got it. So it's a little bit too ethereal. It's like just out there. So if I were to say, well, do you know what the sensation of hunger feels like? Can you feel hungry?
Yes.
Okay. So you do have some body-based awareness.
Right.
You do have some feelings in the body. If you put your hand on your heart, can you feel that? Can you feel the pressure of your hand?
Yes.
Okay. Is it comforting or not comforting?
Comforting.
Okay, good. Yeah, this is a powerful start. What happens if you take your own cheeks in your hands and can you feel the sensation of your hands?
Yes.
Is it comforting or not comforting?
Kind of neutral.
Kind of neutral. Okay, let's find something more comforting. What would be a really comforting, not neutral, but comforting, feels so good? Like, is it with your arms around yourself?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, let's just stay there for a second. And let's just maybe even just gently squeeze with your hands on the arms. And just notice that's a feeling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're doing it.
So let's take it to the next step. Where does the healing come in? Where does the benefit, other than it makes me feel good? I mean, that's a good benefit, right? But how does it go beyond that into healing trauma or grief or some of the very real things that we deal with as humans?
Absolutely. Well, so we're going to heal trauma or grief or other types of emotions by being aware of where they are in our body. That's the somatic piece. So if you were to experience the emotion of grief, does the grief live in any one place or does it live all over the place?
See, I'm so glad we're getting into this because this is where I struggle. I've never been able to identify where in my body something like that is.
Okay. Can I maybe suggest a couple places that we could try? Let's put hand on heart. Let's put both of the hands on the heart and just notice if you feel into the feeling state of grief, does this help or not help?
I would say slight help.
Slight help.
I don't feel it overwhelmingly, but yes, a little bit.
Okay, let's keep one hand there and let's take one hand just really gently to the throat. Don't hold your throat, but just place a hand there and tap into the feeling state of grief. Does this help or not help?
Honestly, I'm not sure. Okay. Maybe this is just a weird me thing. When you say tap into that state of grief, I'm not sure what that is either. When I said earlier that my thoughts feel distant, my grief feels the same way. It feels distant. I don't struggle with grief, I think, in the same way a lot of people do, where it just feels like front and center. Again, it feels a little bit separated from me. It's there.
Well, that may not be the predominant emotion that you're experiencing right now. What is an emotion that you're experiencing right now?
This is so interesting because the instant thing that came to my mind was peace.
Excellent.
So
can we be present with that, just like you are in a state of peace right now? Now, what do you notice is along your back? Is it relaxed or tense?
It's a little tense, actually.
A little tense. Okay.
But I don't know. I don't know if that's just physical, because physically my body just is not comfortable very often.
Okay. So
but my soul is, right?
Got it. So can you just make some movements, bring your elbows up and your shoulders and just take some gentle turns and just see if you can change any of the sensations in the back. And then raise and lower the arms, just playing around. Is there a sweet spot? Is there any muscle that feels like, oh man, that really needed that little stretch?
Yeah, it does feel better.
Okay.
With the movement.
Yeah. So that is a somatic process.
Okay.
So
Okay.
for
I get
you,
it. I think I get it.
I think you do too. So for you, it's going to probably be a feeling like tension in the back, where for somebody else, it might be more an emotion that they feel in their heart or in their some other place in the body. But for you, peace is the predominant emotion right now. Where else do you just notice there's like more energy flowing? And I know that's a little bit ethereal and a little bit out there, but it might be just like, do you feel like you want to put a hand on your heart? If you were just going to intuitively allow your hands to go wherever they feel the most peaceful, where do they go?
Right here on my belly like this.
Excellent. Okay. So what you're doing right here over the belly, and my guess is, you can correct me if I'm wrong, my guess is you're about 2 inches above the belly button.
Yep.
Okay. That
Correct.
is your personal power center. So when you're at a state of peace, you are in your personal power. So for you, a feeling state of peace is linked to that felt sense of I am in my own power.
That is awesome.
It is awesome.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for walking me through that. I know that these practices that I do, like every morning, I do what I call my wander ponder, where I just walk over to the park and sit in nature and just soak in joy and peace and positivity and, whatever else I needed in any given day. And so I know that the result of that is it helps me get through the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because life is sometimes chaotic and hard and crazy. And starting my day that way kind of just gets me into a place of peace and calm where I can get in the mindset of being present and not going crazy with past things and future worries and just kind of staying present. And so I've definitely felt the benefits of that. But in the individual work of some of the, Reiki videos I've watched or the hypnosis videos, or when you start getting into some of these specifics, I often find myself getting frustrated.
You know what? You're not the only one. You're seriously not the only one. And there's a lot of people that are very skilled healers and they're really good at what they do, but they're not grounding what they're teaching into any experience that people who aren't really, really spiritual can grasp onto, whether they have aphantasia or not. It's like, I'm going to use the word out there. It's so out there that unless you can track it spiritually, because you've either had experience or you've had training or you're naturally wired that way, it's not accessible to the masses. And that's why I'm so passionate about bringing this somatic work into the masses, because it is grounded. It is something we can all feel our hands rubbing against each other. We can all feel what it's like when we put hands on a belly. And it is frustrating to me as a practitioner to hear people frustrated like you, when you're just like, I really want this. I want to experience this and I don't feel like I can. So the thing I'm going to tell you is you have more access than I think you realize you have. And I'll tell you why I think that. You knew exactly where to place your hands to feel that state of peace. You knew exactly where it felt good. The second thing is your wander ponder, which, by the way, I love that name. The wander ponder, where you go into the park. It makes me suspect you probably have some of the animal or plant empath gifts where you're actually getting charged by nature. And you're probably communicating with nature in a way that maybe you're not giving yourself credit for. And I see this all the time with the spiritually gifted, where whatever it is that we do comes so easily. We think, it can't be anything because I don't even have to work at it. So that can't count.
So that's interesting that you say that, because I've had in the past few days some very insightful realizations about who I am and where I'm at currently in my journey. And I was over at my Wander Ponder and I'm sitting underneath a tree, and a very profound insight happened when I was listening to a particular part of the Tao Te Ching. And so I'm listening to that, and this very profound statement happened. And it's something that I've been working on for years, but it kind of just like hit me again, like, this is something you're close kind of a thing. And right at that moment, this huge flock of birds came and just surrounded, almost attacked the tree that I was sitting under. And all the leaves just came falling down all around me. So there's birds and leaves and just all this stuff. It just gave me chills. And all I could say was, thank you. Whatever that was.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. That's a spiritual experience. Absolutely. That's a spiritual experience. You have tremendous gifts to have that kind of connection with the animal world. And then there's also so many signs and synchronicities around you, like at that exact moment for them to come and then the leaves falling. Oh my gosh, it just gives me chills to think about it. Thank you for sharing that.
Hi there. I just wanted to clarify this experience a little bit more and a little bit better. I kind of glossed over some details that I think are important. First of all, these birds, they came out of nowhere and they didn't ever land in the tree. They just flapped their wings like crazy and knocked the leaves off the branches onto me and all around me. Then they flew away and were gone as quickly as they had arrived. I'd never seen or experienced anything quite like it.
So when you're sitting across from somebody and you're working with them, it sounds like it's very intuitive. Like you're not going in with a whole lot of preconceived ideas or assumptions. You're just totally just working with the person sitting across from you.
That's right. I have structure in the sense of I have a way a session is going to flow so that we can create enough safety within the session that it feels safe. So there's going to be a pretty consistent beginning and a pretty consistent ending. But yes, in the session, my main goal is to remain agendaless so that I can meet the needs of the person sitting across from me.
Okay. So again, when it comes to the mind's eye or the other senses, do you try and get a gauge of that ahead of time, kind of see where people are? Do you ask people if they have aphantasia or?
No, I don't need to know. I can start to track it. I can start to track whether, and by track it, I mean, I can figure out where they have gifts and where they are perceiving a deficit. And I'm saying perceiving a deficit, and I'm not saying have a deficit. Did you catch that? There's a perceived deficit so many times that people have because they're like, well, I can't do it like so-and-so can. But the truth is we all have our own unique spiritual gifts. We all do. And so my job is to figure out how to bring yours forward. That's literally my main priority. And so I am doing all the things to try to understand how are you communicating with me? And so by listening to you, by watching your body language, Shane, I was able to figure out, okay, so we have the aphantasia. We're not going to be visualizing or picturing things, but I wonder if we can have a felt sense of something. And so I was just listening. And then again, you gave me clues throughout this conversation. You gave me clues about liking nature. You gave me clues about movement, like you wanted to move. And so then I'm thinking, okay, so we have a little bit of body-based movement that is our intuitive access. And then there's something that happens for you in nature. So I'm just like listening and I'm making little mental notes, like little curiosity notes around, I wonder if this can connect for someone. So that's my process with everybody that I work with. And I do all my work remotely at this point. I do hold in-person retreats, but all of my sessions that are one-on-one are remote because I have an international client base.
Okay, very cool. Let's talk about trauma in regards to visualization, things like PTSD. I know, do you work with people with these kind of issues?
Mm-hmm. I do. And I have complex PTSD that has been, it's technically healed, but once you have complex PTSD or PTSD, your brain has been rewired. And so your brain is going to interpret information differently now that this trauma has happened. And so for me, I define trauma as anything that is too much, too fast, or comes in a way that overrides our nervous system capacity to cope, and where we don't have any support to help us understand what's happened. And so by that definition, most of us have some level of trauma. One of the most harmful things that ever happened was somebody trying to create a traumatic hierarchy with the big T trauma and the little t trauma. Because while it is true that the healing journey is different for those kinds of trauma, the body doesn't care whether it's a capital letter or a lowercase letter. Trauma is trauma is trauma is trauma, according to the body. And so when I work with someone, I always make the assumption before I even work with them that there is some trauma there. And then I'm looking at body cues, I'm listening, and my overarching objective all the time is to keep people in with what I call a window of tolerance. I'm looking for stress signals in the body, and I don't want to take anyone beyond that stress so that we could potentially re-traumatize.
Okay. So do you think that visualization or the lack thereof plays a role in all of that?
It certainly could. And I could see it coming in two different ways. I could see that the brain may view visualization as dangerous, as a threat, and may shut off the ability to visualize because of a trauma. I could see that as one. And then the other way I could see it being potentially traumatic is if someone is unable to visualize and they're living in a world that prioritizes visualizing. That could be very, very traumatic if you start to think, well, gosh, I can't do that. I can't do that. So there's probably a lack of understanding. Like, I don't understand why I can't do this. I don't understand why I'm not able to do the things. And that could be very traumatic too. So there's two ways for sure, at least, that this could impact somebody with aphantasia.
So if aphantasia could be a coping mechanism, say for like childhood trauma or something like that. And I don't know if I'm going way out there with this one, but could it be a coping mechanism for a past life?
Yes and yes. Absolutely both. Okay. For yes. When we think about childhood trauma, we know that there's something called dissociative amnesia. Dissociative amnesia is where you remember parts of your life, but there are certain incidents that you have literally no memory of. And this happens especially in childhood trauma, where there's like whole periods of time that are blacked out. So yes, this can happen in like this current life. It could be a coping mechanism for the brain to deal with trauma. And in the case of healing that, I would want to work with somebody trauma informed, making sure that they're not going so fast that it would cause trauma again as you start to remember things. So the goal isn't necessarily to remember, the goal is to heal from the trauma. Maybe those things come together, maybe they don't, but we want to work with somebody really gentle and mindful of that. As far as past lives, yes, absolutely. So depending on your belief system, there's a couple different ways to interpret past lives. And one could be like, actually, we are in an incarnation of a former self, a former version. And I myself have healed past lives that have impacted my physical body and my personal life in a really profound way. And I've seen this happen with my clients too. And then we also know that there's a whole new field of study, new being like, last 30 years, called epigenetics, where we know that we carry past trauma in our cells for 7 generations. And so there was a study. I don't condone animal testing in labs. I want to say that before I start. But there was a study of rats, and they had these rats in cages, and they would pair certain fragrances, the scent of cherry blossoms in particular, with electrical shock. And so the rats would experience the fragrance of cherry blossoms and then electrical shock on their feet. They found that the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of those rats who had never experienced a shock had the same fear reactions in their brains as the grandparents, even though they had never been shocked. And so we know that we carry past traumas. So whether we're talking about past lives as though we've been the ones that have lived that experience and we're carrying that trauma in our body, or we're talking about epigenetically, the answer is yes, absolutely. That can impact our current lives.
Okay. Very cool. I appreciate that. I want to talk a little bit more about grief as well. So I've talked to people with aphantasia quite a bit about grief, and it seems that they fall in one of two camps. It's either devastating that they can't visualize their past loved ones, and it causes them a lot of extra grief, and they just wish they could do that. They hear about other people, being able to pull up images of their loved ones, and they just want that. And then there's another camp where it's almost like it helps them grieve because they're not reliving these experiences that kind of bring it front and center. And so they kind of like the aphantasia aspect because it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind experience where it helps them just kind of detach from it. So I just kind of wanted to get your insight and perspective on those two dynamics, and, on the opposite side of the coin with someone who can visualize those things. Is it a comfort to them, or can it be a kind of a two-edged sword type of deal? What do you think?
I feel like it has less to do with the ability to visualize a loved one and more to do with your capacity to improve your emotional state. So I don't have aphantasia. I do have an experience with grief. I lost my dad in 2024. What I will tell you is, and we know this from the work of David R. Hawkins, who wrote The Map of Consciousness Explained, we know that there are different emotions that vibrate at different rates of speed. And when we say something is low vibe or high vibe, what we're referencing is his work. He discovered in the lab that the emotions that feel really good to us, joy, love, peace, passion, actually vibrate more times per minute than the emotions that we don't like. For example, grief, despair, anger, sadness. So the ability to withstand the emotional toll of grief has more to do with your willingness to shift your emotional state and let the grief actually flow. And what I mean by that is we can't pretend that grief is simple. It's not. It's a very complex emotion and it comes in layers. But if we push it away and we don't let ourselves feel it, it comes back around as other things like anger, irritation, frustration, resentment. But if we let it flow, we also know from the work of neurology and psychology and even endocrinology, we know that the emotions flow for 90 seconds. It feels like it's an hour and a half when we're in that state, but it's 90 seconds if we really let it flow. So if we can let the emotion of grief flow through us and then permission ourselves to feel better, like, okay, that was a lot. I was sad. I was all the things. And now I'm going to go do something like, for example, your Wonder Ponder. I'm going to go outside. I'm going to feel better. I'm going to take a walk. I'm going to dance it out to a song I love. I'm going to go play with my dog. Allowing yourself to do those things has more to do with your capacity to heal from grief than anything else. Because if you're in a state of grief, you experience the emotion of grief, and then you're like, okay, well, now I don't think I've suffered enough. Let me suffer some more. Let me think about all the ways in which, I can be sad again. That person's going to have a very different experience with grief.
Okay. This has been really fun and insightful for me. I really appreciate your knowledge, your expertise, and your insights into this. And I feel like we really just kind of scratched the surface. Before we sign off, is there anything else that you would like to say or talk about that I may have completely missed here?
Oh, I don't think you missed anything, Shane. But the thing I would love to say is that we each have an opportunity to choose to live a life of joy. It's supposed to be fun, and it is a choice. And so just remembering that we all have the power to choose joy, to go have fun. Life doesn't have to be serious, even when it's serious. We can experience joy.
Amen. I absolutely love that. And that is something that I have discovered for myself. I really appreciate everything that you're doing. And it seems to me like your focus is just helping people. And I love that approach to life as well. So keep on doing it. And Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me, Shane. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us, and share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.